Okay, well written. Hey, everybody. We're here doing the third in our ongoing series of Spider-Man movie commentaries. And this is actually our second attempt commenting over this movie. We had a couple of issues on both our ends doing it last time. We'd actually gotten a ways into the movie, I want to say like two-thirds through. So this might be a little bit weird for us, more than you guys listening, because we're probably going to hit a lot of the same points that we've already discussed already. But I still think this is going to be a fun commentary. This is being done while I'm in the process of putting up the second one, so who knows when this is going to go up, or if we'll have recorded anything else by the time you hear this. But who knows? So as usual, if you want to watch along with us, then we'll give you a sort of countdown from when we start. Just know what you think about this movie is. And yeah, you ready to go?
Ready to go.
Okay, so let's do it in three, two, one, and play. So, as we talked about, and like last time, I mentioned sort of having a weird experience the last time I viewed this movie pre this commentary, which was for the scripted review that we did a little while back, and how I always used to enjoy this movie. Like, I don't think it was ever my favorite of the three, but I always generally had a good time with it. And then one of my most recent viewing experiences with it, looking at it with kind of a different critical lens, it just really didn't hold up, and I had a lot of issues with it. And sadly, the commentary that we got partway through has only sort of compounded on those issues. So I honestly feel kind of bad where, with the first Spider Man movie, commenting over it really highlighted a lot more of even more good stuff that I felt like I'd missed. Number two, highlighted some good stuff and a lot of bad stuff. And this one, I don't know. I just have a lot more complaints. How about yourself?
I more or less feel the same way. I remember seeing this movie for the first time in the theater with my grandfather and thinking, this is really fun, but for some reason, it's not as good as the first two. Even as a kid, my first time watching this movie, I'm like, and I didn't have, like, like my critical thinking didn't really apply to movies. Like, there were movies that I liked and movies that I didn't, but
Hmm.
I hadn't really developed, like, I guess the critical kind of taste that I do or that I have now. So I couldn't really articulate why this wasn't a good movie, even the first time I saw it. And I remember distinctly kind of forcing myself to cry when Harry dies because I felt like the movie was begging me to feel sad about it.
Yeah, it never really occurred to me, but thinking on it, that's kind of an emotional beat that we'll talk more about it when we get to it, but that's always been a beat that never really hit me the way I think the movie wanted it to. Since we're listening to it now, though, I figured I'd mention again the score. The score is the one thing that's as consistent as possible across all three of these movies, which is kind of a feat since Danny Elfman is not doing this one. But we're like we just heard bits of the Sandman theme, which I think is great, and not the Venom theme. This movie actually makes a distinction between the theme for Venom and the theme for Peter himself in the black suit. I often hear the Peter in the black suit theme called the Venom theme, and they do share a lot of similarities, but they are distinctly different motifs.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that to an extent. I feel like the Venom theme is made to be a much more sinister version of Peter's theme.
Hmm. But like speaking of having seen this in the theaters, this might seem like a weird comparison, but seeing a lot of people kind of over time being more positive in their appraisal of this movie makes me think of like the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, where that third film was also very divisive and contentious and came out this same year in 2007. And I don't know, over time, I've grown to appreciate that movie more, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. It's definitely kind of a messy movie with a lot going on, much like this is. And I think it shares a lot of kind of structural issues. Like, we'll get to a point in this movie, and part of why I'm grateful for this being like a second go around of the commentary is that I can pinpoint now the scene where I feel like the movie just goes into overdrive and plot points stop getting room to breathe. But for some reason, it works more for me in like Pirates of the Caribbean 3 than it does here. And that's a series of movies I've been meaning to talk about with friends for a while.
I really like the idea of putting Gwen in this movie. I'm not. If you're going to do the love triangle thing, you need to make Gwen more of a character, and you need to not undermine and compromise Peter as a character. Like even before we get the black suit, and we'll get to that scene where they kiss upside down. You can't do that. You
Yeah.
have to be smarter than that if you want to contrive drama between these characters without
And like
ruining the characters.
so much of what we're going to talk about regarding Peter especially, I think could have been fixed if they just done the one major change which I think would come naturally, which is get him in the black suit sooner than he is in the movie. Like we're gonna get to it. I'll bring it up when it comes up. But like he is not in the black suit for the first time until the halfway mark of this film, and a lot of his more questionable decisions and like just how full of himself and kind of self-focused he is throughout this movie would make more sense if he were in the black suit within like early into the first act or some ways before the second act begins. But no, it's a ways into act two before that even becomes a real plot point. And that I think could solve so many of this movie's problems.
I think the filmmaker's reasoning against that is they want to live in the status quo of Peter and Mary Jane together in a relationship before we throw that major monkey wrench into it.
That is true, although, and like I can totally see where that's coming from. My one thing against that though would actually be look at the first film, where I made a point in that commentary of like we don't actually get a lot of Norman in the status quo before he like juices himself up with this thing that like affects his mentality, and yet it still feels like we're getting to know that character and his actual life and relationships after that. Like it's Norman's second or third time on screen when he like takes the goblin formula, and after that that is impacting him in a very similar way to what the black suit you would imagine would do to Peter. So again, the whole thing would be have the transition be gradual. Like don't do what this movie ends up doing, which is put him in the black suit and immediately he starts making a lot of dark character choices.
So at this point, um, I feel like they've ruined almost any chance we really have of empathizing with this Harry. Like already before we get into the stuff that just compounds all that, like even coming out of the last movie, like well, actually no, let me retract that because
Yeah,
Peter doesn't tell him. Peter doesn't just come out and tell him I didn't do it.
yeah, exactly. I was gonna fight you on that because this really is more of a Peter problem than it's a Harry problem. Peter has, like, it's you could have said I didn't kill him in the time it took him to go into that car. And again, we're not exactly made 100% clear on how much time has passed
And what's
between
what's
film two and
infuriating about that more so is much like the Andrew Garfield thing, only it's worse with these movies. Peter doesn't come out and actually agree to that promise.
exactly. And like I have my own kind of hot take about the ending of Amazing One regarding that promise that not like I think I'm the only person who interprets it that way. But either way, in both cases, it's you're right, a promise Peter does not actually agree to, and at least in the case of the Amazing movie, it wasn't a promise made to someone who ended up being a homicidal maniac. So
Yeah. So yeah, why would you really keep that promise?
I think what we're meant to gather from the end of the first movie is whether or not in that moment Norman was being really lucid or still goblin in control or whatever. maybe Peter's meant to take it as like there was still the Norman who was Harry's father buried under the goblin, and he wants to pay respect to that person. But I don't know. At some point, like, I get it. In the moment of the end of the first movie, and like Norman saying, "Don't tell Harry," I feel for Peter in that moment. But like a whole movie later, with the second movie and all the problems that has caused for their relationship, it feels what's meant to feel like Peter respecting someone's wishes just comes off like, nah, man, this is causing more problems than it's solving. You don't look like a better person for keeping this to yourself still.
We made a point to this the first time we did this commentary, but
You want to see like a web thing again? Okay.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, and we do it in these movies. We do it in the amazing movies. Like you mentioned, we do something similar, like a web hammock type thing in Homecoming. But yeah, it would be good to see Holland Spider-Man just make a straight up spider web and like hang around in it. And again, problem with getting to the symbiote as late as we do, we're introducing it here at the 10-minute mark, like less than 10 minutes if you don't count the opening credits. So that goop is just gonna sit around for almost an hour of screen time. Why even bother introducing it this quickly?
Uh, because we have so many subplots that we're setting up and we want to have converge. Like we're doing Sandman here. This movie just has a fair bit going on. And I think that's one of the main criticisms people lob at it is we're doing too many villains and none of them are really compelling.
Yeah, and like I've actually seen, again, from the crowd who has sort of softened on this movie, I've seen people making comparisons like, oh, well, people say Spider Man 3 has too much going on, and yet they'll still praise Avengers Endgame. And I'm like, that is not really an apt comparison at all. Yes, Avengers Endgame has a lot going on, but all of it more naturally coheres into a single whole. In this movie, you can very much tell that there was an entire subplot that the director just did not want and yet had to find space to fit in.
Yeah. And
And
I think had he been allowed to make the movie he wanted to make and devoted, and if he only had to devote time to Sandman and maybe secondarily Harry is the new Green Goblin, I think we would have ended up with a much better movie. And maybe even a much
yeah,
different pantheon of Spider-Man films than what we have right now.
yeah, I, I really want to know what Sam Raimi's just straight up vision for this movie minus Venom is, especially since I mentioned this last time, and I promise this will be the last time I try to say I mentioned this last time. Uh, Thomas Hayden Church, good casting. Sandman aesthetically throughout the whole movie, really well done. He's really not the strongest villain, and there's a lot of issues to get into later on with how we handle him and stuff. And coming off of Goblin and Octopus, that's kind of a major letdown.
Yeah, he's like Henry Cavill Superman, where you get a really great actor for the role, and you give him nothing to work with.
Although I won't say nothing, I think he gets more to work with in this movie than Henry Cavill has being Superman. Just as far as like he gets his moments of pathos. There are moments where the
Oh yeah,
script.
this little scene here works.
Yeah, I think there's a couple bits like this where the script, if nothing else, at least justifies casting someone as good as Thomas Hayden Church. Whereas I don't think almost anything about Superman in those movies justified casting a Henry Cavill. But yeah, I'll point those scenes out when we get to them. But again, a lot of it, like with Venom and like with Harry, when we get to those moments, it's just if only the movie had more time to devote to just him. it's again because I don't want to make the Endgame comparison like a regular thing, but again, you can tell very much with that movie where it's like we know we want to devote time to this, and this is how it's all going to tie into each other. Whereas here, it's like, oh man, you get the sense that Raimi behind the camera is going, oh man, I wish I could devote some stuff to Sandman right here, or I wish I could build on the Harry stuff right here, but no, I gotta do the Venom stuff. And we mentioned this scene with Aunt May, really great. One of her very few. Is this even her only scene in the movie?
No, dude, she gets another very, very good scene towards the tail end of this film. It's after Peter's hit Mary Jane and taken off his suit and feels really bad about what he's done. And he talks to Aunt May and says, "Yeah, I don't think I can go through with marrying her because I really screwed up."
Okay, so we'll talk more about that when we get to it. We didn't get that far last time,
No,
but yeah, this is a really good scene, really well acted, and as you mentioned, a really accurate portrayal of like old lady telling a story with all the tangents and sort of like not getting to the point, and yet
yeah,
it doesn't feel annoying. It feels endearing because it's like this is a very personal story to her, and so it's key to making it so that this doesn't feel like exposition. It
hmm
feels like a character moment for her.
yeah, because she's. I will try my best to not consistently bash the MCU's version of Aunt May.
At least
Um,
not till we get to
at
it.
least not, yeah, at least not until we finally get to Homecoming, so I can do that and it not feel out of place. But yeah, I appreciate that she's actually a supporting character in this film.
Hmm.
She's a very strong and emotional part of most of the comics that I've read with Spider-Man. Where even I want to say there's been points even where he's like an adult and out of the house, he'll still occasionally go over to Aunt May's house and see how she's doing. Maybe even get some advice from her. Like she remains a consistent, important part of his life.
Just look at PS4.
Yeah,
And again, we'll talk about it when we get to it. And I'll have less to complain about her in Homecoming than I will in Far From Home when we eventually get to that.
yeah. I don't really have any complaints about her in Homecoming either. Most of my complaints come from Far From Home.
Yeah, but you could argue, even in Homecoming's handling of her, though I like it way more than Far From Home's. Again, this is a discussion for that movie, but it ties in because it feels like they were looking at her portrayal in these movies and going a bit too far and
And
overcorrecting.
here again, this bit, the spider
Yep.
sense.
Uh-huh. Like he just barely has enough time to register that something is coming. He can't even react, and then boom, best action scene in the movie.
It's fun. It's intense.
Yeah, it's got that perfect like balance of those two things where it's like immediately you know that this is a real problem, and yet at the same time, the way it's shot and the choreography, it's just a fun watch. This is one of the scenes, like I mentioned earlier, where I'll just look it up on YouTube just to watch the action scene.
And
Unlike pretty
weirdly, the
much
best two action scenes in this movie are the ones where Peter's out of costume.
yeah, yeah, and they're both against Harry. If that's the degree to which Raimi is invested in the relationship between these two characters, and that comes through in the way that he's handling their fights over other fights. I don't know.
This is so fun. Him climbing up the fractured piece of the building while it's falling in free fall. That's so cool.
Yeah, even though again, really too little, too late, Pete. Of all the times that you could have chosen to be like, he killed himself. Like, really, you should have brought this up earlier.
And the only
And
reason
this
he
whole bit,
didn't is because drama, I guess.
yeah,
That and wanting to
honestly,
maintain a promise for a guy who, as much as he said he was a father figure, I don't know how much that's actually true, even going back to that first movie.
Yeah, they meet each other for the first time at the beginning of that film. So,
Yeah, I
but with
think
that said, I like this. I like that. This is something that I wish more superhero action scenes would do. This thing with the ring, where it's like it's not because so many fights in superhero movies nowadays, no matter how good they are, really do just boil down to good party versus evil party. I like when some of the fight scenes can do stuff like this, where it's like there's a third element that's not. It's like it's a complication where for a few beats of the fight, it becomes more complicated than just bad guy versus good guy and two parties clashing.
like in Hellboy 2 when Hellboy has to take care of a baby while fighting a giant monster.
Yeah. Yeah, I like stuff like that. I like when there's like a little unforeseen thing that adds another layer of like unexpected tension to the fight that's just not it's not just like will he survive? Like obviously he'll survive, but that the ring adds another the baby in Hellboy 2 adds a little thing of like, "Oh, but what about that thing? Will that thing be okay?" And this I love like how tight this corridor is.
Yeah,
Like
this is so cool.
this scene is just such a great use of like all of the little things in play from like the ring to the environment to just keep adding tension to where it's like
I
there's
love
even a
that.
little bit of
I hate
yeah, I
those
hate
things.
those things. There's even a little bit of tension for Harry where it's like he's having a little bit of trouble staying balanced perfectly while he's in this super tight corridor.
Which is
And
exactly why Peter swings through this alley so he can kind of give himself the upper hand.
whoa, okay. Although I will say, uh, the I hate those things bit still, I think it's a funny line, but it still reads to me as like something that thinking on it, both this movie and the second one, to varying degrees, are kind of guilty of, which is playing on people's memory of the first movie versus what actually happened in the first movie. Where like we
He
complain,
does, like, him getting cut up with those blades is a major part of that action scene where they're in that burning building.
true, I just feel like that reaction isn't necessarily something you would have to something that you only encountered once, like a year or more ago. I honestly don't know how much time is passing in the universe of these movies. Like, I had a whole thing last time, and I'll get to it, where part of an issue that I've always kind of had with this movie, and to a greater extent, number two, but also this one is just reliant on me, like, not knowing for sure how much time is passing between scenes or just remembering that wrong. And we'll talk about them when we get to it. But here, I believe, yeah, just the choice to do amnesia with Harry. It's we meant it's just an excuse to sort of take him out of plot points until we need him again.
Yep. Which is really unfortunate. I imagine that would not have been the case. I imagine we would not have even had this amnesia plot if Raimi didn't have to stuff Venom in this movie.
That is true. Although, again, just thinking on how Raimi tends to pace these movies and sort of how the plot in one and two played out, I almost wonder, like, uh, is that necessarily true? Like,
Or
I'm not
maybe
sure.
he would have done what I actually wanted it to be, which is he's faking the amnesia thing.
That might have been what we did with it, yeah. Because I still feel like just the way that Raimi has generally approached these, where we'll have long stretches of the movie regardless, where the villain will kind of be off to the side doing their own thing. I don't think we would have a movie where it's Harry in costume or by some means trying to attack Peter for most of it.
Yeah, I think that's something that we would have gotten in a proper sequel to Far From Home, or at least that would have been ideal, where pretty much right after that movie, villains and stuff are after him.
Or maybe not even villains, maybe like the public or maybe good guys, maybe the cops just not giving him a break. Like Raimi's trilogy seems to want to give the story and Peter like a break to just pause and like sort of take stuff. And I don't think you could Harry for the whole movie knowledgeable of like his revenge unless you would do something really weird and like resolve that at the halfway point, and they wouldn't do that. As mentioned, he had plenty of time to get out of that uh, experiment, or at least out of the way of those blades before something happened. They're not blades, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the Sandman effects still hold up spectacularly.
Yeah.
Although,
It's pretty impressive.
although I still feel this way that we cut to this scene from Peter seeing Harry in the hospital. I understand. Yeah, right here. We're cutting back to it. I understand maybe why you would want a kind of buffer between the two hospital scenes just so that you can imply time is passing. Personally, I would have stacked the two hospital scenes on top of each other and the two Sandman scenes on top of each other. Something about cutting back to this from Sandman when the last scene before Sandman was right here anyway just feels weird to me.
I don't really have that like at all, but okay.
It's not like it's a big problem or anything. It's just something that occurs to me watching it now. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Why don't we just stay here? And in the Geekvolution commentary of this movie, Eric made a point about how James Franco and Harry is kind of like right back into Spider-Man 1 mode with this amnesia thing. I think you could make that argument maybe with the performance, but with the character, as we'll get into, he really does not seem like he just jumped back to where he was mentally in the first film, which is what we're trying to make it seem like.
Yeah, this is very retroactive. They were
Yeah.
friends, but their friendship feels more troubled and a little more hollow than the Harry in this movie is playing their friendship.
Yeah, not even just their friend not even just their friendship, Harry in general.
Yeah, he is
Like
a
whenever
person. He does not feel like he's back to who he was in the first movie. He feels like a different person.
Yeah, he seems very introverted and kind of troubled and a bit dour in the first movie. And like when MJ comes in this scene, he's like, I know that face. It's like that's not the same guy. And like his and MJ's relationship is very different. Again, like I don't know. It's because this can't be what happened, but it almost feels like Raimi working on these movies or whoever he got to write the scripts didn't go back to watch the first one. It feels like either that or he's intentionally doing what I suggested earlier, which is he's playing on how he thinks people remember the first film
Yeah,
and not how it actually played out. Like you
exactly. And
like you
that
think
line he
back.
just gave about how I'd give my life for them, I don't buy the Harry from the first movie saying that. I really
Yeah, no,
don't.
maybe Harry from the first movie would do it, maybe, but he'd never say it. And it's just like it's yeah, man, I just lost my train of thought. But this scene is gorgeous.
Yeah. I also feel like that Harry line is not so. Well, maybe it is subtle foreshadowing. I mean, maybe I'm thinking it's not all that subtle just because I've seen this movie.
Yeah, in retrospect, it's not remotely subtle. Although I don't know, I have a hard time imagining like someone who's really thinking about like what's to come, and unless you're really absorbed in it and absorbed in the moment, I have a hard time hearing that line and thinking, "Oh, this is the end of the trilogy. Harry's gonna die, isn't he?"
Yeah, it doesn't feel particularly hammy. So yeah, I don't feel like it's actually all that foreshadowing.
But this, like him rising up out of the sand, and he doesn't have really a handle on how to make a full body yet, and this is all done in silence minus the music. This music, by the way, this track is gorgeous. Just this whole scene is so freaking amazing.
Yeah, I said before this feels like a Pixar short.
And like the way we open with the tiny grains of sand as just like kind of a flex of like, yes, we did model all of these. But yeah, no, I remember what I was saying. Just all the hairy stuff and sort of stuff with Peter and MJ both in this movie and the second movie feels like just playing on cultural memory where it's like you remember that Peter and Harry were friends in the first movie. You don't remember how awkward that friendship was. You just remember that they were best friends. And so we're just going to have them act like best friends in this movie. And like in number two, where it's like, maybe you don't remember that MJ maybe like puts it together that Peter's Spider-Man at the end of that film. You just kind of remember him leaving her alone and going off and stuff. And it's like, I don't know if it is just getting different screenwriters, but I feel like they should have. I don't know what they should have done because I don't know what happened, but something just feels really incongruous. Where movies two and three kind of act like they're in a world where the first. And that was just my way to pad out this scene because otherwise it would have just been me saying, brilliant, gorgeous, 10 out of 10, nothing wrong with this scene over and over again. Here
And
we go.
we,
This scene.
what's up?
Oh no, I just. What were you saying?
I was just saying that we talked about this last movie, but I'm not. I mean, this is so retroactive, but like I can't even be on board with the idea of these two getting married.
Yeah. Like, makes sense to me that Peter would want to propose, and I guess that's all this movie really does with it, since it's not like.
It's not even like we see them get married at the end.
Yeah, we don't even know for sure that they're actually like back together at the end, but yeah, like the idea that I'm supposed to root for them to get married after the second movie and like their relationship in this one, it's like even if I'm not in a position where I necessarily think one of them is a bad guy, which that kind of changes from scene to scene, but I don't think the two of them could make it work personally.
No, it didn't matter how much chemistry they did or didn't have. If you have a script anything like this one that throws both these characters under the bus so hard, there's no way you can get me to invest in that.
And like it's not even necessarily that they're both thrown under the bus. They both absolutely are, but in scenes like this where it's like again, it's hard to say who's the bad guy in this situation if there even is one because
Yeah, there isn't. At least not in this scene.
yeah, in this scene, MJ needs like emotional support because of her very deeply ingrained sort of like insecurities due to her dad.
And he's
And
trying to support her. He's just
but
maybe
he's,
not
he's
going about it in the best way.
and even if he was, he doesn't have the chance to fully support her because he's got to go out and be Spider-Man and save people. And like in any other sort of relationship that has those hurdles, you would sort of want the idea to be that like okay, this scene sets up that kind of discrepancy and then later in the movie you want them to solve it, but as the movie goes on, it's just like the ways that they aren't fully compatible just build and build and I'm kind of like no, maybe it's just for the best, maybe it's for both of your best interests that you don't try to like have your life and juggle being together. Like it doesn't seem like either of them can make it work really.
Yeah.
I really like that line for some reason. What's that thing doing in my background? Move away from the window, ladies. Yeah, what did you think?
It's so weird to even make her a model, and you already have her being the smart Gwen from the comics.
Jeez, I forgot that one. I forgot that one lady just got straight up hit with the debris. But yeah, I mentioned I wish that more superhero scenes or more superhero movies had scenes like this, where it's just I understand why we don't, especially since the sort of approach of the MCU has been very, very plot driven in the sense that they want to be as narratively tight as possible, and like straight up just civilian rescue scenes don't really lend themselves to narrative tightness. But something that I hope the Disney Plus shows do now that they have more breathing room, and something that I just want in superhero movies again is just have your superhero go out and save a person from like a person's in trouble, just save them.
I think that the trouble with that is a lot of the MCU characters, and even a pretty sizable amount of the ones we're going to see on Disney Plus, they're not street level heroes. They're not Spider-Mans. They're not going to be saving cats out of trees or even doing stuff like this.
That's
Like,
true. But like one of my go-to examples, or not go-to, but like an example that I like a lot, which the Marvel movie does do, is all the little bits interspersed throughout the climax of Age of Ultron. Like when Iron Man flies into that house and sees the family there and is like, get in the tub. And he like flies them out through the tub. I love that. Or like when Thor goes to that woman who's in the car and falling and like throws her up so that Captain America can catch her. Like stuff like that. Like you can still nest it within a larger action sequence, but
yeah, but I
not
don't think I don't think the Disney Plus shows are necessarily the place to do that.
maybe. But like I don't know, with some of the Disney Plus shows like Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, She Hulk, those guys are pretty street level. I could see them doing something like that. Especially since episodes and like weekly episodes, I would hope would lend themselves more to okay, not every episode has to be constantly pushing plot forward. We can do some stuff that's a bit more self contained, hopefully.
Well, they're
That's
miniseries, so
true, but they should roughly be about 8 hours ish per season, so that's a lot of time in which to do stuff. But I
yeah,
like
but
that, and for this is a conversation for another time. But I like that line from Eddie, where he's like, the suit makes or not Peter's photographs make you look, bloated, kind of chunky. It's like it's funny because that's kind of like where my mind goes when I think about like what the suit in these movies kind of look like to me. It's like they're almost perfect, but there's something about them that makes me think like it's a little bloated, kind of chunky.
I don't really agree with that. I will say, while I do love the choice of making the web patterns 3D printed and like extend out off the suit, um, like whenever they do like those like movie tie-in books for kids and they draw out the suit how it looks in these movies, it's not great drawn out like in comic book form.
Yeah, that might just be it. It's possible that it's also the really visible like dentations of the ears. Something about it just makes you think like, there's something a little bit like I just had the word and I forgot. But yeah, Eddie Brock, very obnoxious
Yeah,
and
I,
like very intentionally so, but man, is he such a little weasel.
I love Betty's retort with him now. That's fun.
Yeah, and like I enjoy the kind of having Jameson kind of like have to watch his temper because of blood pressure. Although there is something admittedly very sitcom-y about that. Like in this episode, the loud, angry guy is gonna have to not be as loud and angry, so because of blood pressure. But I think it works.
Yeah, I think it works.
I like Bernstein's.
It's better, cheaper too. Oh God. I think a lot of these bugle scenes were.
Yeah. Drama. And here we go. I have a girl that I intend to marry who you got coffee with once. And like, this is another thing with just the way that these movies handle some characters where I'm like, do they know that they're making him like this deludedly crazy? Because the rest of the movie doesn't necessarily play out like he's just a total nut job, and yet that's kind of what he is.
Maybe not a nut job, but he is not. Well, actually, yeah, kind of, because he's kind of living in his own world.
Yeah,
Like,
it's maybe it's maybe because I just watched this, but he reminds me of Invader Zim a little bit. Where like no matter what happens to him, he's always got this picture of what's going on in his head, and absolutely nothing can make him deviate from that. And it's like, I don't know, man. Maybe get a reality check. And like obviously that's the point, but it's kind of something that this movie does, and like the second one did with Peter and MJ's relationship, where it's like the fact that he is not all there in the head is very obviously on the page. Like, there's no other reason for you to write that line. And yet at the same time, like no one else in the movie treats him like he's crazy. Like, even once he's in full Venom getup and like Peter's trying to reason with him, I'm like, dude, in all the time that you've known this guy, he has never once come off remotely reasonable or like someone who's living in the real world.
well, to be fair, Peter doesn't. We, the audience, know, but Peter doesn't know about like him wanting to marry Gwen
That's
and
true.
the fuck and the they only went out for a cup of coffee thing. Like Peter doesn't know that.
Yeah, that's true. I like the costuming on Harry. That's the one thing I felt like they were paying a bizarre amount of attention to the first movie, because he's dressed exactly like he was in the early scenes of that film. It's a nice little callback in that sense, sort of. Again, assuming that the audience has watched the first movie or at least remembers that sort of recently, it's a good bit of like, oh, he really is back in that place. And I wish that the rest of this handling like felt like that. Although, wait a second. He just had the line, I wish I could remember more about him. So, like, he's forgetting details about his dad. So, is the idea just he's acting differently because his memory's not even back to high school? It's like
Probably
really,
earlier.
it's really spotty, and
Yeah,
like it's filled with gaps. I still don't think that justifies the attitude change, but I'm just picking up on that now.
and
And when he's
this is
had
awful.
this is
This is
awful,
horrendous. First of
but
all,
I do like
this
before
would
before
never
we get
happen. This,
into the scene,
like,
uh, the little sting of the Green Goblin theme when Harry catches that vase. That's a nice touch. Okay, now go full on into how terrible this scene is.
okay, this scene is horrendous for a multitude of reasons, but one of the biggest ones, this would not happen. Even if you were to be fired, you'd be notified. You wouldn't have to show up to work only to see someone else auditioning in like one of the scenes you're in. You wouldn't walk in on an audition and find out that you're fired like this. Secondly,
Yeah,
she's supposedly a very popular actress in this universe. She had billboards all over the place last movie. Like, even if her role in this play wasn't very critically well received and she was taken off this, she wouldn't have trouble getting work. Like she wouldn't suddenly be a washed up, no one wants to hire her again actress.
exactly. She goes she goes from like 100 to 0 in like barely any time at all. Like, see, they're like putting up a thing over her name, and it's like, I'm sorry, you don't get like third billing in a stage show and then just get like kicked off, and then they just like put a little sticker up over your name within like a day. And like, granted, we discussed that like the sort of highbrow quote unquote critics who will like criticize her performance, they have much more pull and much more influence on like stage shows and Broadway than they would over like movies and stuff. So you can't necessarily compare this to someone who has like one bad performance in a movie career and like they still get work. But at the same time, it's just like what one, you're right. Why would they not tell her? Two, I'm not sure that one performance getting badly roasted, even if it's by all the papers, gets you fired. And also, my thing is, we need some kind of indication that she's like lost her touch or that something is throwing her off her game because you don't get to the position that she was in the first place and not give great performances. Like, that doesn't happen. So, like, what changed between the second movie and now that people who must have liked her performances before suddenly don't?
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a reason why, as opposed to it just being an arbitrary reason for drama.
Yeah. And like we mentioned earlier that like I buy that it's in character for Peter to want to propose to her. What feels less in character, and again, something that would be mitigated if he'd had the black suit on by this point, is like he's taking pictures of her and then he's really just using that as an excuse to take a picture of his own like banner celebrating himself. And like in the scene that's coming up, he's gonna do a bunch of stuff just to soak up the limelight pretty much. Like he wouldn't even have had to realize that he had the black suit on already. That thing attaches to his bike at the 10-minute mark. Who's to say the first time he goes to sleep, it doesn't just attach itself to him and it like feeds off of what sort of ego he does have, and then that stuff gets like amplified. It doesn't just have to be like super negative feelings like aggression or grief or revenge like it ends up being in this movie. It can be subtler character traits that we then kind of use that as an excuse to like build off of. It can be, okay, maybe Peter does have a little bit of a little bit of a big head now that everyone loves the fact that he's Spider-Man and the suit can like attach because of his ego. But yeah, and then him doing stuff that's a bit out of character would make more sense. I don't know. There's any number of ways you could do this. Like he wouldn't even have to know that he has it on at this point. It wouldn't even have to like take over the whole Spider-Man outfit. It could just be like on him somewhere and he doesn't pick up on it. But again, the Sandman effects are great. Okay, here we go. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, cool. Okay, here we go again. Just I don't want to bring this up every time, but like this is not where Harry and MJ were in the last movie. And
And
assuming that we're right and he's just got like massive gaps across his entire life, that's not where he and MJ were prior to their relationship either. Like he pined for her and then they got together and it was super awkward. That's the extent to which they know each other in his mind.
she should be. I feel like she should be like less comfortable with Harry than she is, especially given how he treated her and the stuff that he said about her. Maybe. Oh yeah, and actually no, she overheard like the way that his dad spoke about her, and she wasn't there for this, but he eventually says that he was right about her. Like I don't know, I just feel like MJ, if we're going with
I'll let that one slide, honestly, just because it's been a while for her. Like, it's been a year or so or more since that's happened. She mainly thinks of him as Peter's friend now as opposed to her ex boyfriend. And, the memory loss thing. I can think of, like, in these circumstances, she wouldn't be she wouldn't be like standoffish with him or anything, but again, they wouldn't be like as simpatico as they are. And like you mentioned this last time, his line about having written her a play, where it's like,
I
I'm
don't
not
buy
even
that he would
sure.
do that.
I don't buy that he would do that. I don't buy that within the time frame that they know each other, she would tell him that she's interested in acting. Like in the first movie, her telling Peter that she wants to act is like a big deal. And you get the sense that that's not something she commonly lets people know that she's interested in. Like, there's no way she told Harry what I want to do is act in time for him to like write her a play. And also, the whole kiss thing, really dumb. First of all, I don't buy that a crowd is like that gung ho about like kiss him, kiss
Why would
him,
they jump to that out of nowhere?
because he's Spider-Man and she's an attractive young woman standing next to him. I don't know. I don't feel like anyone would be like that. But then
I mean,
Peter
we don't do
himself,
that with celebrities in real life.
yeah, and like Peter is like eggs her on. And it's like, go ahead, lay one on me. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Even with kind of the swelled head that like Spider-Man hero worship will give him, that's not in character.
No, I'm just going to cheat on my girlfriend right now in public, right in front of her, because a bunch of people said so.
Yeah, no. This action scene, not bad, not not like great either. Like this isn't one that I like search up on its own, but it does some creative stuff.
And I do like this clip. I'm the sheriff around these parts. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
take out that uh-oh. I hate that.
it is a little goofy. Yeah,
It's so goofy. And they did it with Jessica too in Defenders. That really took me out where I'm like, she would not say that.
I forgot that happened. You're right. But like, I actually like even more than the "I'm the sheriff" around these parts. Like his response, he just like shrugs. He's like,
Okay.
"Okay." Ow! Hitting that bus. I always like when Sandman makes a giant hammer. So simple, but I like it.
And he saves these two
Oof.
officers.
Yeah, and so like I had the problem with this initially that I have and still have with Spider-Man 2 when Doc Ock escapes, and to a lesser extent the first movie when Goblin escapes, which is just that, like, in all three of these movies, Spidey will encounter the villain, they'll get away, and then he'll just spend the rest of the movie acting like that encounter didn't happen. This one, actually, of the three of them, justifies it the most because, again, I'd forgotten just how little time passes. Like, it is the next day in story when he actually does go after Marco again. So this actually doesn't have that problem. It just doesn't feel like that because I don't know what it is about the pacing of these movies, but I always feel like more time is passing than has actually passed. Like, I remember this movie taking place over like a little stretch of time, like maybe a week or a couple of weeks, even if
No,
not more than
I
that.
never
But
I
no,
never thought it was that long.
it's like a couple of days.
As most of these movies usually are. We never really do a big time jump.
Well, don't we do one in the first movie? I feel like putting aside just the whole Spider-Man montage, like I got the impression that a lot of time passed from them graduating to the rest of the movie. Not like a lot, but like a significant amount of time. I
Uh,
don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that though. I don't know. My perception of time in these movies is very skewed. It just feels weird coming off of the Garfield and Holland Spider-Man who, when given like the opportunity to, will like seek out their bad guy and try to fix the problem. Whereas with Spider-Man, with the exception of him finding out that Sandman is connected to Uncle Ben, it's always, always the villains coming to him or leading him somewhere. and that just feels weirdly unproactive to me.
We've talked over most of Bruce Campbell's cameo here, but it is great.
Well, I mean, he's going to be throughout this scene,
Yeah,
and he's pretty funny.
and I love that we've had him coming in as someone completely different for every single movie. I think that's fun.
Mm-hmm. And he has the line like, "Romance, I am French." The way he delivers it makes it sound like someone who is not French trying to convince you that he's French, and I kind of love that. And like here, we're gonna do the thing where he just straight up talks to himself again, and it's like, I don't know, man, this is weird to me.
Uh-huh.
Like if this is all in his head, then that's fine. But like just the full conversation, acting it out and being like, "Oh, don't cry." It's like, that's a little gooberish. Like
This is a gooberish
very
dude.
I know, but it's really gooberish. But like and I feel this way now about this scene where it's like this is like it's gonna keep sort of getting chipped away at after this scene, but this is the real moment where their relationship kind of cracks and splits. And I
More
just
like
feel like,
implodes.
yeah, and I just feel like we haven't built to it properly. Like the kiss is a big deal and it's a problem, and he should not have done that. But I just feel like there needed to be more time. Like the relationship deteriorating had to be more gradual before we got here.
Really?
I don't know. It just
I think him cheating on her right in front of her face in public is more than enough.
no, I don't mean in terms of like in story whether or not it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. I just mean structurally. Like again, so many of my issues have to do with pacing. And like it feels too early in the movie for this to be happening to me. And part of that is just this movie has so much stuff going on.
Too early? We're about, I want to say we're maybe 7, maybe 8 minutes away from being in the middle of this movie, and you think it should have happened later?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. Maybe that's other movies that are about like relationships conditioning me to think of the big relationship fallout as being like an end of second act thing. But I don't know. Something about it feels weird.
Yeah, that's the typical romantic comedy, and I don't love that. I mean, that's fine in its genre when it's done well, but I don't appreciate that kind of thing being done everywhere, especially in a movie that's not specifically a romance film.
I like I like that they keep coming forward and Bruce Campbell has to keep sending them back.
Yeah, that adds some much needed comedy to this scene.
Uh, I don't know how I feel about this. How come you never mentioned her? Like, I get it, you're not in a great place, MJ, but I don't know. Is this one of those things that, like,
Well, I mean,
not quali-
he had the nerve to kiss her right in front of her.
That's
So
true.
she's just insinuating that, oh, well, you actually know this woman. Maybe you've been doing stuff behind my back with her.
Oh, yeah, that's true. What do you mean, what does she mean? It's a very obvious question.
That's what you say when you just don't want to answer it. I've had that. Like, never in a relationship, like in a specific relationship scenario where I was in the wrong. But I would like kind of slyly say that when I didn't want to answer the question or I wanted to try to avoid it.
uh, uh,
And then, of course, the, finally they get the champagne ring in it, like right after she leaves.
did they not? Did they not think maybe the fact that she was leaving the room was a cue to don't go through with that?
It's more dramatic if they do it anyway, and he has to take out the ring like this and just look at it sadly.
and also ironically funny, I guess. Like, he's got the guy behind him playing her song. And you had an issue with this. I think the fact that he leaves her message and she goes to pick it up and then just doesn't.
Yeah, well, that's not really an issue. Like the fact that she picks it up means that she wants to extend an olive branch and work things out. But I have an issue with her not calling him back
Mm,
when she doesn't pick up the line in time.
right. Yeah, that feels a little contrived. Like she was just looking for the excuse not to actually do it.
And it makes her that much.
Mm. Okay, yeah, so this is what I was talking about. For whatever reason, it never registered for me, like intellectually, the fact that his realizing that Sandman killed his uncle is the morning after he first meets Sandman.
And this is infuriating.
I
The
mean,
fact that we're even doing origin at all in the third film and retconning it no less.
yeah, yeah. Like the thing about that is kind of uh, kind of lazy to just go back and ring the death of Uncle Ben for yet more pathos. But it also kind of makes you question, like, why the other guy in the scene in the first film is kind of the way he is. Like, why doesn't he just say, like, I didn't. Ah, man, I gotta watch that scene again because I don't know what actually happened. But like, I'm pretty sure Peter's like, you killed him, or why did you kill him? Why can't he just be like, I didn't even pull the trigger. What are you talking about? Like, why couldn't he be? If this happened, if this is how it happened, then why would the other guy not pin it on Marco? Is a question.
I mean, he he was in a panic and Peter was beating the snot out of him. So,
But the real answer is they hadn't thought of it yet.
well, and we talked over it. Well, you talked over it, but I really like that this him remembering it is black and white. And we get a brief flash of color when Marco pulls the trigger and kills his uncle because that's the only part that acts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But the
I
rest
like.
of it is just what he wants to believe.
Yeah,
Like Marco did not have a sinister like grin on his face when he shot his uncle.
and that's consistent with what we see of his flashback to it happening in the first movie, which is he changes in his mind the delivery of that guy's like thanks when he enters the elevator to make it more sinister. Like he wants to paint this situation in his mind as there's a clear, like evil, scummy bad guy who I can take revenge on, and really that's just his inability to be objective about this specific situation because he's so close to it.
You imagine that's probably what Butcher has going in his head, like a Homelander just brutally raping his wife and then maybe killing her, or maybe his wife kills herself in some kind of horrible fashion.
Mm. He's talking about the boys for everyone who doesn't know what the context for that is.
Oh yeah, we talked about that, but we weren't using this specific audio, so it didn't come out great. Now she wants to be a decent girlfriend and too little too late.
Honestly, I mean, like, where he's at right now, too little too late is better than nothing.
At the very least, at least she's here trying to extend an olive branch.
Yeah, and like, honestly, I really like this because it feels, for once, like she's being really mature, and it's not even extending an olive branch. It's her going, okay, what we're going through is a lot, but we can put that aside for now because this is really important to you. Where she's like, our relationship issues are not resolved, but you just found out something really big and really personal, that can wait. And so here, finally, the suit like uh, like picks up on his feelings of like discontent and wanting revenge and stuff. And now, at roughly the halfway mark of this movie, the Venom suit is actually gonna get on him. And I don't know. I
Um,
just that
Earlier when MJ said everyone needs help sometimes, Peter, even Spider-Man, in the trailer for this movie, that reads as setup, and even in the scene, not as much, but it kind of feels like setup. Really pay off in any major way. Like Harry comes to help him out, but that feels so hollow, I guess is the best way to say it, where it's like they're calling each other buddy and pal, and that
we'll get to
doesn't
that in
really
a bit too.
matter. Yeah.
That's really silly. But if you wanted to, you could maybe read it in like a really like a darkly ironic way. Like everybody needs help. Well, now he's got help in the form of a creepy black suit that enhances all of his abilities.
And this score really sticks with me. I love this score.
This theme is great. I love it. And yet at the same time, this is the moment I was talking about earlier where I feel like with this scene for the next, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes or so, this movie's going to have a real problem with letting plot points breathe. Like stuff, I feel like from this scene for a while now, it's just going to be like stuff happens after stuff happens and everything is just piling on top of each other.
A lot of comic book fans complain that they just made this suit black, and that it wasn't the classic black symbiote suit from comics, where it's a big white spider symbol.
I don't have a
Um,
problem with that, honestly.
yeah, I don't either. And it might have been cool to see them do this spectacular thing where it starts off like that, and then gradually, as it begins to take over Peter, it gets to that costume.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
like I
it's an aesthetic thing I don't mind.
this is also maybe a really petty kind of nitpicky problem. Like I don't even really consider it a problem, but the previous scene was meant to give us like that's meant to be the establishing for the audience that the suit enhances his abilities. So it makes sense when he puts it on to face Marco because like it'll make me stronger and stuff. I'm not entirely sure how well that scene actually conveys that because it just shows him swinging once and like it's a really big swing, but it doesn't feel like anything that would be out of his capabilities without that on. And so here now he's putting it on and like you have to assume the only reason he goes with that suit is like it gives him extra power. Visually, I don't know if we're conveying that great. I don't know.
Um,
That
I
like his
mean, yeah, it's certainly,
abilities here are any different than they are normally.
yeah, not really.
Well, I mean, we're gonna do it
And
right here, maybe, where he pulls up this grate and like he just yeah, this. Like I could
I mean,
see
I
how
don't,
he's
I don't buy that. That's something that he couldn't do without the black suit.
yeah, me either, but we don't see him do it all that often unless it's like a big scene, like a big climactic thing. Like he generally what the hell? I don't know. I just this whole thing reeks to me of like again, you could really tell Raimi didn't want to quite be bothered with the black suit, and so he's like getting what he needs to get done with it as quickly as he possibly can. I will say though, I really like this, where the light shines just for a bit and you can see him, and then it covers up and he's gone. That's great.
That those little flourishes really work in scenes like this.
Mhm. He actually punched that brick. Thomas Hayden Church like broke his finger. Now see this, I like this shot where it's like a slow zoom in where it's like, oh yeah, the Ben Parker incident like stuck with him. Like you can see the guilt on his face as he hears that name.
Yeah.
See, it's like moments like that where I'm like, see, those kind of justify getting a really good actor for this part. I just wish we had more moments like that because for the majority of the screen time, I feel like anyone could kind of play this.
Well, as John Campbell always says, it's never a mistake to get a good actor in your movie.
It's true. Someone mentioned feeling like Sterling K. Brown was wasted in Black Panther, and I'm like, if you're judging solely by the amount of time he has on screen for the caliber of actor he is, maybe, but like in that movie, all of his scenes are incredibly relevant and powerful, and they call for someone with a lot of pathos. I don't think that all of Sandman's scenes call for a great actor, but it's good to have one anyway.
Um, well, and not to talk about that movie too much, but yeah, when I hear that name, just hearing Sterling K. Brown's name, I'm like, yeah, you don't put him in a movie where he's not going to be either a main or secondary character.
Hmm.
I,
Okay,
I,
I mentioned this like earlier in the movie last time, but I Peter thinks that he's killed him here. Like that's what Peter thinks he just did. This is his second time in the whole movie wearing the black suit. I don't buy like I think the movie wants me to believe that he's had that thing on long enough to influence his behavior like this.
and to feel absolutely no remorse about killing that guy.
Yeah. And like we do the thing where he like fringes his hair and that's like the visual indicator that he's gone dark and like in the next scene after this conversation he will put it back the way it was and then he'll fringe it up again later. It's like that's one of those things you think of as like, all right, we're gonna have him be in dark mode for a little while. No, we're gonna have him be in
I
dark
really
mode
like this
for,
little bit.
yeah, this is good. Like you get the sense that Ditkovich, like no matter how much he harangues Peter, he has some little bit of affection for him, or at least understands that he's a good person.
Yeah,
But
he's like he doesn't immediately jump to he's just a douchebag. Like no, like he knows Peter. He's just
yeah,
like nah, something's up. He's a good kid. Something's up. Something's not right. Something's going on.
yeah. See, Peter's like he's looking in the mirror at himself, and it's like he can't like deal with what he's become already. It's like you've had this thing on for one scene, and if you're already at this stage where you're yelling at people and killing people and messing with your hair, I don't buy that you would want to take it off. Like, this movie's really inconsistent with what exactly is the symbiote doing to him. Because the general way it is like the more extreme his actions and attitude and behavior get, the more he's addicted to it and the more like he and the suit are kind of becoming one and he doesn't want to part with it. Here, he goes from 0 to 100 where he goes from normal Peter to pretty extreme and then he sees himself in the mirror and he's like, whoa, gotta get this thing off, and then he'll put it back on and he'll be right back where he was, and I don't know what's happening.
I don't know if it's necessarily all that inconsistent so much as um, well, we don't really get enough information about his relationship with the symbiote to really say, and I think that's purposeful so they can get away with being inconsistent because
Yeah.
we don't really know the rules all that much. We know very loosely, just going off of what Dr. Connors said, but that's not
Yeah,
really enough to say whether or not his relationship with the symbiote is inconsistent.
Yeah, because all we really get from Connors is that the suit is symbiotic and that it amplifies aggression. Those
And,
are the
and,
two
and
things.
this scene, he doesn't have the suit on, and he's talking to Aunt May like, Spider-Man killed him, and what, you're not happy about that? Like, that's not Peter Parker.
You
Like,
know you're on, even if you've still got like residual like attitude or whatever because of the suit, you know Aunt May better than that.
or you should.
Like, I don't know. Is this supposed am I supposed to be thinking that the suit is still impacting him, or is he just out of character right now? And it's like, the thing is, even the notion that the suit is an addiction doesn't really play into this movie at all. Like, we think of that as a thing of the Venom saga in the comics, and especially in Spectacular, and like other more contemporary stuff that's done the black suit, where it's like, it sort of like compels him to keep it on and keep using it. That's not really part of this movie. And yet I think we're supposed to be acting like it is. I don't know. Just, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but you can really tell that Raimi wasn't really interested in this thing and is just putting it in scenes out of obligation.
More or less, yeah.
And so she needs someone to comfort her after, you know, another job. And is it supposed to be maybe like dramatic irony that she's going to Harry after getting back the waitress job? Because, like, recall in the first movie, she talks to Peter about, like, don't tell Harry, I think he'd think that me being a waitress is, like, lowly or beneath me. And, yeah, I don't know. I'd, I'm not sure that she would go to him, but whatever, I guess.
Yeah, we've just decided we're going to be inconsistent with the first movie from the word go on a strict level with this movie. So,
I guess we might as well just take it in stride. I don't know.
yeah.
Today's good. The little thing, like, what, you want more?
Oh, that's funny.
Jesus. She opens up the door just to say bye.
She's cute.
Yeah, I like her. She's like a good little minor character.
This scene is really well acted, but really awful.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, like I just said we should take it in stride, but I can't help every time these two are together being like, how did these two get like this? I'm not
Yeah, like
sure.
this feels like a scene from a rom-com that doesn't even belong in this movie.
Yeah.
But it works so well. Like this scene in isolation, if you know nothing about these characters, you just watch this scene, it
It's
works
charming.
really well.
Yeah, it's this nice, charming little goofy thing. But like, man, I don't know. Nice moves though.
I don't know if Harry was this carefree ever in his previous life.
Yeah, no, I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I know I get the feeling this commentary is going to sound really repetitive, but so many of my issues just come down to I don't buy it. And with this relationship in particular, it's just like, did we not watch the first movie? Harry is not this guy. And what it feels like to me is that they're forcing him to be this kind of happy-go-lucky, charming guy so that when he eventually, like, I say eventually, in the next scene, falls back down from grace, it's meant to feel like more
Tragic?
tragic. Yeah,
And like when he dies, we'll actually care, or at least that's what they're hoping.
yeah, because he was such a positive guy when he had amnesia. But I'm just like, this doesn't feel like Harry Osborn to me.
At least not the one we've had in those first two movies. Not even close.
And like I mentioned earlier, that the plot points are just gonna start like crashing into each other at the speed at which they come out. We got a little bit of a break, starting with this kiss. Like she kisses him, and like I guarantee you, before we even have time to process that that happened, like in 15 seconds, he's gonna be like, "Oh, my memory's back. I'm evil again," and then he's in less than like 2 minutes of screen time. That's probably exaggerating, but like within the next scene, he is going to be invading her apartment to strangle her.
Okay, so she wasn't really specific when she left Peter. We don't know if they're really officially like broken up, broken up. If they're not, she just cheated on Peter with Harry.
Again, yeah, she just keeps doing that to people. But I don't know. Like this is a spur of the moment thing. I'm not saying it's remotely justified, but clearly she thinks it's a mistake, and that's why she leaves. But like,
And then
I
this
like,
him remembering comes out of nowhere.
I do like that it starts as soon as he starts drinking again, because we made a big deal in the second movie about how much alcohol he consumes and how that's only making him worse. I like that the second he takes a drink of alcohol, that's when he starts remembering again. Do I think it works at all as an actual explanation? No, but I like it as a little subtextual thing. But this like the memories all just like they come flooding in, and like he's remembering lines,
That
Green
he couldn't
Goblin
have
lines
even heard.
he wasn't he wasn't present for. What?
Then we attack his heart. That's something that Norman's like evil subconscious said to him in the last movie when he was by himself in a scene. Well, not the last
That
movie, the first movie, but
like that is way too abstract if that's the idea. Like I don't know, like
and
what should
why is his plan to strong arm MJ into breaking Peter's heart as opposed to just killing Peter? He just
three
wants to
minutes
expose him
ago
now.
3 minutes ago these characters were smooching and dancing the twist, and now we're here.
This is the movie we're watching.
This movie, like, man, just get rid of the Venom stuff, and everything else here has so much more time to breathe.
And I could see myself being really invested and like shocked in that scene if he was just faking it the whole time and then decides to flip the script on MJ.
Yeah, like imagine if we'd followed her through that scene, and like we weren't there for him getting his memories back. He just shows up after the last thing we did was see them kiss, and then she's like, "What is going on?" He's like, he reveals that it was all a trick. It's like that would be genuinely kind of frightening, and that would like throw the whole previous part of the movie onto its head. But here, it's just a contrivance. Just like we need him to get the memories back now because we decided that's when we want him to get the memories back.
Yeah, this does feel like a scenario where we much like the final season of Game of Thrones thing, where it's like we built out plot points and we're just kind of gonna contrive and force our way there.
Yeah.
Characterization be damned.
And MJ, buddy, what are you doing? He's Spider-Man. Just say
Yeah,
Harry came into my apartment, strangled me, threatened me to break up with you, and by the way, he's over there.
and like she wasn't there for the scene, nor did Peter tell her for whatever reason. I don't know why he's keeping that a secret. But Peter, like, he wasn't trying to be Harry, but even still, he managed to kick Harry's ass. So
Like, does he just think that it would make their relationship too complicated if she knew prior to now that he was like in a supervillain costume trying to murder him?
Yeah, because he believed that he murdered his father, even though that didn't really happen, and he would have just come out and explained that to Harry. And then he finally did, but it was too little too late, and Harry was still ignoring him. And
Oh, wait a minute. This is now just occurring to me. Does MJ ever find out that Norman was Green Goblin?
no, Peter never tells her.
Wow. Wow. Wouldn't you want that to come up? Like, Harry tried to kill me because I accidentally, like, quote unquote, got his dad killed. The guy who tried to kill you, by the way, I think maybe you should be aware of the
He's
scenario
keeping all
here.
of that a secret from her, and I don't know why. In
And that,
Ultimate, his relationship, one of the things I love about his relationship with MJ in Ultimate is he tells her everything, and there are a few scenarios where she almost dies, and she's really stressed out. She explains to him like, there have been times where I've broken down, like I'm screaming and crying in my sleep, like, and I've written about all this in my journal to get my feelings out because I don't want to bombard you with all this stuff and make you feel bad for being a superhero. But like this is hard for me. And he's like he contemplates like, wow, should I really been telling her all this? It felt so good for me to be able to have someone I can talk to about all this stuff. But should I? Should I really be telling her everything that I go through? And I like that like how really open they are, but also the struggle of that. And we don't really have that here with this
yeah, and
character. He's why is he keeping these secrets from
he's keeping secrets. She's keeping secrets. She didn't tell him she got fired. This is a really bad, like, unhealthy relationship as far as communication goes. And it's been that way for the past two movies. And I get it, we need drama, but why should I want them to be together?
her? Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, like you just mentioned, and I actually, this slipped my mind because I brought it up before, this movie kind of retroactively kills my sort of justification for ending Spider-Man 2 on the shot we ended on, because like you very rightfully asked why end it on that shot, and I'm like, maybe that's meant to be her realizing that she's dating a superhero and he could be in like mortal danger at any moment. That never comes up in this movie.
Yeah, she's not concerned about that at all. If anything, she's just jealous of him and his
Yeah,
notoriety as a superhero.
yeah, she's jealous of him. She's jealous of like Gwen being close to him and stuff. She feels neglected. Like all that stuff you could maybe make work in a more long form thing if you really felt like you needed the relationship drama. I don't really think you do. But to me, I think if you want relationship drama coming off of the second movie in a way that still wants me to like root for them to be together, the natural place that you go is, oh man, I didn't realize how stressful dating a superhero would be just because of, the fact that you are a superhero. And that's not in this movie at all.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Why has Harry decided I'm gonna go from trying to kill Peter to toying with him? Is it because I just failed the first time and he kicked my ass?
Well, I mean, somehow in his mind, he heard the first we attack his heart line.
Well,
So I guess he thinks Peter will be easier to beat or his victory will be more sweet if he, like, breaks Peter down first.
I guess so. Yeah, that's our justification because we know that the villain is not going to succeed in killing the hero, so we gotta give him some other goal he can actually reach.
Some kind of small victory. Yeah.
Yeah,
And here again, we have the other really good fight scene in the movie.
this is really good. Yeah, this is pretty much all done practically, and actually these two actors going at it for a lot of it. And I like the kind of jazzy score here. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
I was just about to bring up the score for this scene.
It's not something you would immediately think of for a Spider-Man fight, much less a fight where they're both in costume and none of these. like I don't picture either of these two characters voluntarily listening to jazz, but it really
Yeah,
works for the scene.
and yet I think the reason it works so well is one, just like the last fight between the two of these, the balance here is different, but it's still a very similar balance of like, yeah, see, like that's genuinely funny. There's a different sort of ratio here of fun and intensity, and that's kind of perfectly captured with jazz as a genre, where it's really discordant, and like the popular sort of idiom with jazz is that it's like it's all about the notes that you don't hit, and like there's something really chaotic and yet fun to listen to about the scene, at the same way it's like really kind of fun to watch, but at the same time we should not be wanting these two to have this fight. This is really intense and not good, and yet at the same time it's really well done. And I like that. I like the little knock on the head.
Yeah, that bit between them earlier that I laughed at. It's like I protected you in high school, now I'm gonna kick your little ass.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Also, funny for different reasons. I'm done trying to convince you. Peter, you barely tried to convince him. You had like one conversation about it.
While he was trying to kill you.
I like that. I like that in the end, Peter was basically almost toying with him and he could really just take him down in one punch. And this, I remember, if there's one thing I remember about seeing this movie for the first time in the theater, it's that and thinking Harry actually died right there.
And and after reading like the hundreds and hundreds of Spider-Man comics that I've read, and then going back to this movie, I'm like, can we stop doing that? Can we stop like having Peter attempt to kill people in this movie?
Eh. Okay, something that I will talk about, but first, I also like the score for this scene. It's this really short, kind of fun little motif that I put in a couple of the videos. Like I've put that score in a couple of reviews, I think, and I don't know, it's really fun. Although we immediately with that scene start setting up Black Suit Peter as a skirt chaser, and I don't know where that's coming from. That like wearing the black suit makes him like hit on everything with anything that moves. I don't get it. And like that's gonna be a thing consistently.
Well, that
It's
makes him like edgy and like confident, and
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like it's coming from anywhere in his character. Like he's only ever shown attraction to Mary Jane. And like he did the kiss with Gwen, but that was more about like pleasing the crowd and like feeding his Spider-Man ego.
I think he is. Well, maybe I'm just reading into the comic book knowledge, but I think there's a bit of an attraction to Betty even before that scene where he gets flirty with her.
I could maybe see that, but I think it's really, really, like really understated. Also, yeah, if you want forgiveness, get religion. That's that's highlighting sort of the theme of the movie being forgiveness, and what do you do with forgiveness? Who deserves it and who doesn't? It's very interesting, but I'm not entirely sure it lands.
Yeah, it doesn't land, especially because they don't really know what they want to say with forgiveness. It's kind of just a empty platitude ultimately. They don't
Mm.
really know what they want to do with it.
And like thinking on it, it mainly pivots around Sandman, and that just brings to mind, why does it feel like it's been a million years since Sandman was in this movie?
And
Like, has
why
that?
does he have to forgive Sandman for killing his mom? I mean, not his mom, his aunt. Not his aunt, his uncle.
Yeah, I mean, like I think the idea here is that he doesn't. I don't know. We'll talk about it when it gets to it. But the general idea, like outside of this movie, like in in real life and stuff is that you want to forgive people because holding on to that is just going to
I don't know how
trigger.
I feel, but I really don't like this.
Which part? The cookie
Him
thing?
taking advantage of that girl's crush on him.
Ursula? Yeah, no. That's not all right. And like thankfully she never maybe quote unquote thankfully she never like realizes that's what's happening, but yeah, that's real scummy. And of course, the whole point of this montage is that he's being real scummy. But yeah.
So Betty's kind of into it though.
Yeah. Oh god, I like this.
That hair flip.
A hair flip when he sits down. It's later, but when he's sitting down, he's got his feet propped up, and Jameson is just looking from the desk. Right
Yeah,
here,
right.
yeah, this is great. Yeah, that's great.
The first person to ever silence J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh, this is. Oh no.
Who thought this was a good? I want to know who was looking at this footage in the making of this movie and thought, "Yeah, this we got something special here, guys. The fans are gonna love this."
Like again, I get it. This is clearly what this Peter Parker would think that a cool bad boy is like, and on that level, it works. It's just you know what it is? It's not even the problem of it's goofy. Like it is, but fine. It's that pick a tone, guys. Like people will get on other superhero movies for tonal issues, but this is like a whole plot point of like Peter's got this thing on him and it's influencing his behavior. Am I meant to be kind of freaked out and scared about it, or am I meant to find it funny? I don't think you can really do both. Like Peter having the black suit influence his behavior can't both be the reason that he kills someone and gives into revenge and like physically assaults people and almost killed his former best friend, and also this thing that like generates yucks in this comedic montage. I don't think you can do both of those things.
And this comes out of nowhere. This is just so, yeah. This is just so we can have Peter inadvertently like undermine Brock and be even more angry at him. But
Well, I don't know.
well, yeah,
You
not
can
even undermine's the wrong word because Gwen's clearly not actually into Eddie. They went on one date, got coffee.
but I mean, I totally buy that Peter would take Gwen out for a night, especially since his motivation seems to be making MJ feel bad, and he knows that MJ already knows about Gwen, so of course he would pick her.
I
So
want to
yeah,
see someone try that at a restaurant and see if they get the waitress aroused like that.
especially since every other like she and Gwen and Betty like react well to his quote unquote charms. Every other woman reacts the way that you would expect a real woman to act, which is that they get kind of creeped out by him. Like again, we're really inconsistent with everything having to do with the symbiote. Is he funny? Is he serious? Do people like him like this? Do people not like him like this? Does it influence his behavior certain ways or other ways, or doesn't it? It's man, it's like scene to scene. What the symbiote does to Peter Parker is not consistent. And if the idea is just that it makes him erratic, and so the betrayal of it is erratic, maybe that's something, but it really just feels like they didn't put too much thought into it.
So it's like he can literally have it do whatever he wants in the moment.
Oh, God. This is
Uh,
such a
this is insane. This is such an insane scene. I love when he kicks the chair back.
yeah.
You can tell that's all practical. That's very Raimi.
Yeah, this whole thing, like him flipping off the coat and her hair blowing back, like this whole thing is so Raimi. And yet at the same time, it has exactly the same problem that I've just spent minutes talking about, which is it's this really fun, goofy, indulgent scene, and then we will transition immediately into like straight up pathos. This suit is like not a good thing. I don't, man, this movie does not have what the first two movies have, which is I feel like they just completely master their tone. This one has that for maybe its first half, and then as soon as that suit gets on him, the tone is all over the place. We've kind of talked over almost all of her major scenes, but like I don't know, just I do like her going up to MJ and being like, "I'm so sorry." That gives her a little bit of nuance, but there's something just about Gwen in this whole movie that's like she's kind of airheaded, and like she really is just a device for the other characters.
I don't really agree that she's airheaded, like at all. But I do think she's more of a plot device character, yeah.
And she's like out of the movie now, right? She doesn't show up again, does she?
Nope, that was her last scene.
Wow.
That is what we did with Gwen for her first cinematic appearance on screen.
That take your hand off me. I really like that. Yep, there we go.
Hank Pym would be proud. I think only comic book fans would get that reference. That's slightly a very darkly comedic reference.
Like immediately, like on a dime, we flip the switch over to like like serious drama mode, and what I'm just picking up from that scene, and because of the fact that like when Connors was explaining it, he was just busy like not paying attention, eating cookies. Is this like the moment where Peter realizes that the suit has anything to do with his behavioral changes? Like he did not put together that the suit was influencing him at all until just then. And if so, is that also no, that can't be when the audience is meant to be putting it together because we have a whole exposition about it.
This is a cool shot.
Yeah, see, this is really cool. And yet I'm still stuck on the fact that not 2 minutes ago we were doing a whole song and dance thing. It is really cool looking though.
That's a cool landing. Pose. Like I think Raimi continues to nail a lot of stuff visually all throughout.
Yeah, I can't complain about this movie at all visually. Although I will say, again, just the weird way that I feel like this movie is moving at 100 miles an hour. I feel like I've hardly had time to get used to him in this suit, and now he's about to take it off. And like looking at the time codes, it's been almost 40 minutes since he put it on, so I know that's not technically true. But the way that it feels, it's like if you're gonna do the black suit arc, like let him be Spider-Man in the black suit for a while, and I don't feel like we've got that.
I think this movie is the first thing to do the the bell tower thing. You know if that's true or not? Because I've seen it referenced in the in Spectacular.
I
But
do. It's very possible. I can't say it with confidence because it's obviously not the first thing to do the sound thing. That's like inherent. But I'm not sure. You might be right about that.
if it was done anywhere before this movie, I feel like it was the '90s cartoon.
Hmm. That might have been like, well, we know that he has the suit on in a bell tower in the 90s cartoon. I don't think that's how he gets it off. Also,
The
little
suit, I
thing,
mean, the gunk, it looks amazing.
it does. Although I will say, little thing, I don't buy that Eddie is able to tell that that's Peter from all the way down there. Yeah, see, now this is the Venom theme. And it does transition nicely from Peter's black suit theme, but it is its own thing, and it's really creepy, and I love it.
I like the screech. I like the noise that Venom makes.
And Tim in the Venom suit doesn't look bad. Like, I made a point in the review that my preference would be that in costume Venom is like bloody ginormous compared to Spider-Man. But if you're gonna go like, average guy sized Venom, then fine. But at least keep him in the mask, please.
Yeah, don't like what makes it silly and dumb is him constantly retracting it because we got to give the actor face time.
And like, he's already had a lot of face time in this movie. It's not like anyone's gonna forget that it's him under there.
This is the scene I was talking about.
Right, yeah.
Can't catch a break, this guy.
I do kind of like this though. I like basically using Aunt May as like a barometer for where Peter's at. And so we give her three token scenes. One at the beginning when he's at like he's super high on himself and everything's going great for him. One in the middle where like he's just done like the darkest thing that he'll do in these movies, and he kind of needs to confront her with that and sort of like get her perspective on it in order to realize how messed up that was. And now again, now that he's kind of over it and he's gotten that influence off of himself and he needs to basically reaffirm with her again. He seemed so sure, but their relationship really isn't that healthy. They should maybe see other people for a little bit.
Well, that, and I like what he says here. I heard her,
Mm,
and now I don't know what to do.
mm.
Like, even if their relationship wasn't unhealthy and didn't have all this baggage, what do you do after you just hit your significant other? How do you come back
Mm. And like forgiveness, playing into things again. You have to forgive yourself before you can forgive other people, before you can make things right.
and that is a very real thing, and a thing I struggle with.
Join the club. I do think this movie has some cogent things to say. It's just when we get around to the end and
This
that
is so laughably silly.
what the shadows.
I mean, in the line, Spider-Man. Ah, then he just throws them.
I like that he throws him and then he goes to walk away as if that was no big deal.
Yeah, I just threw away this like weird alien monster.
Like, I just got this weird thing that looks like Spider-Man mixed with a shark. I'll just throw him away and not worry about it.
That's pretty badass.
Also, I don't like that he doesn't say we. All of his
Well,
lines.
we're not doing enough with the symbiote as a thing in this movie because Sam Raimi just doesn't care. So I would not have expected that. If we were going to get like the symbiote as an actual entity, we should have done it with Peter So the fact that they didn't do that lets you know that we weren't going to do that with Eddie.
Yeah, well, kind of just barely treating it like a living thing. Again, it's a plot thing that Raimi felt obligated to put into the movie, or was obligated to put into the movie, and so it's there. Ah, Peter, if you just stuck around for like 2 seconds, you could have avoided a whole mess.
Yeah, she would have seen you and been like, you know what? I know you punched me in the face, but I'm here for you.
She
Because
wouldn't be getting she would be getting kidnapped right now. I
you
think I
almost
might
never see this in superhero movies anymore. Like the only other thing I can think of that has like a broadcast going on at the same time, like a big major third act action scene, is Days of Future Past.
Hmm. I thought you meant you generally don't see you don't see like hostage situations.
No, you see those a fair amount. We do. I mean, especially in the early 2000s, we were doing damsel in distress a lot in these
Hmm.
kinds of movies. But no, specifically having a broadcast that the whole world can see going on at the same time.
And like again, the real problem with the forgiveness thing, and specifically Peter forgiving Sandman, is that Peter is not the only person who got wronged. Sandman just crushed a cop car. He's helping Venom fight like a ton of police, and there's no way that they're all surviving. The movie wanting to prioritize Peter personally forgiving Sandman for something that was an accident does not erase the fact that he needs to be in jail.
Yeah, that's very true.
I like that. Spider-Man Stop Us If You Can, written in the 90s cartoon font.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really fun nod.
Oh, right, Harry, I forgot you were in this movie.
And Venom being particularly popular in that series.
Also, sorry I quoted you.
I remember this having like the Two Face reveal in The Dark Knight effect on me as a kid. First time I saw that.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, given how close that explosion was, you honestly got off easy.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
Peter
like,
did too, given that it happened to him. But I guess he has. Yeah, Peter has enhanced healing in a way that Harry does not.
you're really lucky that you didn't by accident grab one of the, like, ones that will disintegrate you into a skeleton.
That would have been hysterical. And Bernard,
Oh,
the world's worst Alfred.
buddy, why wait this long? If you knew about it the night of, why didn't you tell him the night of? You want. I'll never get over this. You watch Harry, like, fall into a depressive, alcoholic, revenge-fueled, like crazy person where he almost lost all of his money, and like all the while this is happening, it never occurred to you to be like, hey man, this is actually what killed your dad. If you loved his father as you've loved him, then you must have done a terrible job, because you really screwed up, man. Like, there
Yeah,
was no other way we could have written it so that he finds out. This is really, really weak.
yeah, because then we gotta have a dramatic scene, and we don't have time to really give that the attention that it deserves in a movie that's already
And like the way
well
that
and too long.
scene plays only emphasizes how out of nowhere it is. Like, Bernard walks in, gives the exposition, and then walks out. It's like, you, eh.
And this is the third time we've done this, and we will continue to emphasize. I think. Well, actually, yeah. Mary Jane is down. Is actually on the ground during that monument scene, so we actually don't do a. Well, I mean, that's not really true since Liz is in the elevator. So I guess we do a damsel in distress scene in Homecoming, but we don't do it in Far From
True, although
Home.
she's also not she's also not the only one in that elevator. But
Yeah.
yeah, at least once in every movie pre Far From Home, we've got to put the love interest in danger somehow.
Well,
And to
there's a scene in Amazing that really subverts that, where you think she's hiding from the lizard, and the lizard just takes the contraption and leaves.
hmm,
I
Scott,
hate this. There's no. Well, I mean, assuming the Venom symbiote like knows that that's a catchphrase that he would use, but I don't think he's ever actually said that. He's never
yeah,
actually said that. He never even told anyone about his spider sense. That line makes
that
no sense.
that's one of those things. That's one of those things I keep bringing up, which is sometimes these movies want to play on the cultural knowledge of Spider-Man, be that in these movies or somewhere else, and not what's actually been in the movies. So, like, the audience knows that that's a thing he says, and so we'll have Eddie say it, and no one will question it. Although I will say I like his delivery of "if you know what I'm talking about." Dude, it's
But
been like a whole minute long scene of you talking. Put the mask back on. Like, does Raimi just like not like Venom to the point that he doesn't like the whole mask and teeth thing? I
see,
can't
that's
imagine.
awesome. See,
Yeah,
I gotta say it's not that because he gives Venom a really cool like screech and
yeah, and
look.
like you would imagine that big, scary monster Spider-Man would be to his sensibilities, right?
Yeah, but for whatever reason, he just doesn't like that character. So as as uh, as much as I like as much as I like Venom, I kind of actually I really wish that Venom was not forced into this movie. Actually, I don't know if I wish that because if this movie isn't what it is, then we don't get Amazing, and that doesn't lead to anything in the UCU. We would, I very much think we would not be living in the current Spider-Man landscape we are. If this movie
Yeah.
was made without Venom and received much better than it was.
I just even even with the Disney and Sony deal, like that's going on and whatever troubles that's having. And of course, I've said multiple times, I think that deal's going to be fixed before we can see any fallout from it. But part of what I feel kind of bad about, like, even if that deal does still like fall through and doesn't get fixed, even if Sony gets like full film rights to Spider-Man into perpetuity, I don't believe that we'll see a really cool Spider-Man versus Venom action scene in a movie for a long time, and that kind of sucks because what little we get of just Spidey fighting Venom one-on-one in this movie is really fun and cool. And I wish we had a whole like extended fight sequence that was Spidey versus Venom.
Yeah, that would be nice. Especially because Venom is one of the only like dark mirrors of the hero characters that really works.
Yeah, and like you think because if you were gonna do like the quote unquote definitive Spider-Man trilogy, then Goblin, Doc Ock, and Venom would be the three that you choose, I feel like. And so like it's almost kind of tragic that Raimi had to be forced into including him in the first place because like Venom is such a character that I can imagine Raimi doing great stuff with, and he is Spider-Man's like third like big arch nemesis character after Goblin and Octavius. And so it just makes sense. Like Spider-Man 1 Green Goblin, Spider-Man 2 Doc Ock, Spider-Man 3 Venom. That just like follows. Kaboom!
It's
This whole thing and like the next scene when he does like the jets on his arm gave me like a fascination with how you can make glass out of sand and stuff.
with good actors and good effects. I it's hard not to get goosebumps hearing the classic score.
Yeah.
And this isn't earned like at all, but it's happening.
Yeah. Like on a very surface level, it's fun, but
Yeah.
again, it's relying on that thing where you remember that the two of them were friends, right? When really nothing about their actual friendly relationship, even from film one, builds to something like this. Also, we talked over it, but that one kid earlier going like wicked cool, so cheesy. Film's extra. That child rang all of the obnoxiousness that she could out of that line. It's great. See, like this is cool. Like this environment and like these characters like fighting like this. It's fun. Just wish it felt more natural.
So this is what we're about to get here leads to one of the funniest lines in the whole movie. I think.
I like that. I like that thing you just did, like using the web to turn the direction. Yeah, I know. It's, hang on to what? I feel like we might have both of us, or maybe just me, been a little too dismissive of the action in this movie. Like it is generally really good action.
It's solid for sure, yeah. Um, and
Some
at the
scenes
very
I definitely think better than others, but on the whole, pretty strong. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying that yeah, I do think it's an important aspect to nail um, whenever you're doing Spider-Man.
Hmm.
This is so cheesy and goofy. The way he falls, and the last thing we see is his hand, and then it plops down.
Yeah, especially since I'm not sure why exactly he falls. Like, sure, those looked like pretty strong missiles, but like in your regular sized body, you can tank bullets no problem. So why don't you just stay big?
Because we're finally done with him, and we want him out of the fight.
Fair enough.
Horror movie moment. I love it.
Ooh, that was just brutal.
Yeah, and that is Venom. He's a brutal fighter. I think he beats the snot out of Spider-Man more than almost any of his other villains.
Ooh, keep the mask on though.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is Well, and honestly, it doesn't look great when you try to make him talk. Like
True.
the way his mouth is constructed, it just doesn't work. That's not a mouth that you use to talk with.
What I would do maybe is lean into it, like lean into how weird that is, maybe distort the voice even more. Again, have him say we instead of I, so that way it's kind of justified and like, yeah, it's weird and creepy and not exactly like it doesn't
But
look
again,
right.
we can't do the we thing because you kind of have to rewrite this entire. Well, this whole movie should be rewritten anyway. But
Although I get the feeling I know what you're gonna say because we brought it up earlier. Like,
yeah,
to what degree is the symbiote even alive? What's about to come up right now, I think, kind of disarms that argument since we're gonna have a thing where it's all like
yeah. I mean,
life
it's
and
its own
unlike.
entity and it's by itself, but we don't know how much sentience it really has.
That's
I
true.
just we don't really. You need to have the we thing when it's connected to Peter. You can't just do it with Eddie.
Yeah. He got stabbed and he fell like a couple dozen feet. That's pretty. Peter's really lucky that Harry's not gonna be dead in like the 5-10 minutes that it takes him to beat Venom and like reconcile with Sandman.
Yeah, he has a whole like damn near 5 minute conversation with him, and Harry still hasn't bled out yet.
I really like this though. This is cool.
Yeah, I think this is my favorite. Well, one of my favorite shots in the movie. It's a
Mhm.
cool one take.
I like that bit where he like jumps up and he webs up the things with him and he knocks Venom back down when he tries to jump out.
Yeah, that's really fun. Raimi had a good handle on Spider-Man's action and ability in these movies.
Yeah, and like I said this in the Far From Home review, and we'll talk more about it when we get to that movie. I feel like that movie is the first one after this to kind of have action that's close to that good. I think if I'm gonna definitively say anything, it's that this franchise of the three, I was gonna say had the best action, but yeah, that's pretty laughable.
That's horrendous.
And just like I think it's supposed to be kind of tragic, but again, this Eddie was a cartoon character to begin with, so
And he has one of the most cartoony deaths I've seen in a comic book movie.
that's great. You should still go to jail.
Yep. Because you definitely killed at least a dozen police officers in this movie alone, if not more than that.
Yeah. Like, see, a lot of people who like are really devoutly fans of this trilogy often cite like the extreme focus on the human emotion angle. And yeah, human emotion is the heart of storytelling, but maybe I think you can make an argument with this movie and the previous one that maybe Raimi just got a little bit too. I don't want to blame Raimi entirely because it is a script issue, but
Um,
someone got a little too invested in the human catharsis, like emotional stuff for the characters at the expense of, okay, at some point we have to ask, does it make sense that they do this? Does it make sense
and
that Sandman just gets off at the end? Sorry, you were
I
saying?
we never mind.
What? What happened?
I just you were gonna say something?
No, I was asking if you were going to say something.
Yeah. So I would have had this like if this is actually what happened, I would have had that whole flashback scene play out in color,
Yeah,
especially because I thought that that was what the subtext was in the earlier scene where the only bit of color that we see is when he pulls the trigger because that's the only part that actually happened.
you're right. That would have been great, especially since when you brought that up, I'd never actually thought of that as like, well, I just thought it was a neat little visual flourish. But when you mentioned that, like, the gunshot itself being in color because that's the one thing we know for sure happened, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And here it is still a memory, so it makes sense that even now it's not entirely objective. It is still Sandman's perspective as a human
But
being, but like if he's
but I
right,
still feel like that should have been done in color.
yeah, if
First,
he's
because he was actually there and Peter wasn't. That's
yeah,
Peter's like fabrication, like in his head. That's how it went down. But Marco was actually there, and he's the one that pulled the trigger. So
yeah, that's maybe a little bit inconsistent somehow by being too consistent. And like, see, this is such a big moment for this movie. Like, I Forgive You, that's like wrapping up one of our major themes, and you can't just
I
let
don't
it go
buy this.
off.
Like he went out, he's still killing innocent people in this very movie. Like, why does he deserve forgiveness?
Like, if Peter forgives him for the thing that he like personally feels wronged over, then fine. You can forgive someone while still asking that they the thing to note here is that Peter is not the only person who got hurt. This movie is trying to pretend like Sandman did not hurt anyone else but Peter slash Ben, and
Exactly.
that's just not true. Sandman has to earn other people's forgiveness. He can't just get Peter's and then go off.
I wish I cared about this as much as the movie wanted me to. Um, and like I said, I remember as a kid, like seeing this in the theater and forcing myself to cry because it felt like that's what the movie wanted me to.
And like the thing is when Peter says like I should never have hurt you and said those things, like he's talking about being in the black suit and like all the actual hurtful stuff he said to Harry. There's no It feels like ending this movie, we still didn't get any resolution on the whole you kept the secret about my father for X amount of months slash years. And like that is the big thing that's been building and like slowly cracking this relationship apart across the whole trilogy, and it doesn't actually have a resolution.
Yeah, Peter's keeping this secret for no reason, and then Bernard just tells him what happened. And when he shows up to back up Peter, there's no discussion about that because we got to get to the action.
Yeah, like this whole ending reeks of like it's too easy. Like it's too easy that Bernard just comes in and solves the problem for Peter of Harry's misunderstanding. Like Peter put in the minimal amount of effort possible to explain things, and then he never actually has to do it. Bernard does it. Sandman doesn't actually have to do anything else to earn proper forgiveness. He gets Peter's and it's easy and he leaves. Eddie would be like a weird character to have kept around, so we just have him blow up, even though, and I forgot to mention this, I personally don't buy that Eddie is addicted enough to the suit that he would toss himself in there with a bomb. Like, we just get rid of him because it's easy to tie up that loose end. This whole thing just feels really easy. And,
Yeah,
like,
killing your villains off in general is typically really easy.
yeah. And sometimes it works. A lot of times I would even say it works. But in this case, I don't know. I think it would be more in Eddie's character to want to survive, I think. I do think to a degree, I don't know, just I feel like it's possible that we've been a little more harsh on this movie than maybe it deserves. Like we've tried to point out positives where we found it. And I am I don't know, I'm not like really like disappointed in it the way that I was last time I watched it because last time I watched it, I'd previously always really liked it, and then the flaws just became more and more glaring, and I felt kind of disappointed with the movie, disappointed in myself. And, it's fine. like I said this on Twitter, if someone loves this movie, I get it. But a lot of the more negative stuff just sticks out to me a lot more. And it's all like core, central to the movie relationship stuff.
And we end on it, and like they don't get married. Presumably they do, I guess. But this just this is the ending of Endgame with none of the investment.
And like on paper, just having them after all this turmoil, they go up to each other, they don't say anything, they just embrace and they start dancing. That's kind of beautiful. I just wish that the previous two movies hadn't made me go, I don't know if you guys should really even bother. Like, we've spent two movies fighting for this relationship pretty much, and at no point do they consistently seem like they make each other happy. And that's just a weird feeling to have. But I mean, that was it. That's the movie. I appreciate that as an ending note, but I don't know. I have issues with this whole movie, and High Top Films, who I'm going to mention at least once per Spider-Man video, I'm sure, had a whole thing where he's currently working on his video for this movie, and he claims that it's less focused in the first hour. I feel the exact opposite. I feel like after the first hour, this movie gets really unfocused, and that's when a lot of my pacing issues crop up. And I don't know, I've made my case, I think, for why this movie doesn't really hold up. Here's hoping next time I watch it, I feel better about it. But like, where do you stand with it right now?
Pretty much the same place I always have. Um, on a very, I mean, I don't want to say just superficial because you know, action scenes are important, and the action scenes on display here are genuinely enjoyable and memorable. So I appreciate that a lot. I like the score. There's even um, there's even some solid performances here, but on the script level, it's just bad.
And like, I really feel like this has been a very gradual decline insofar as I don't think the highs in this movie are as high as 2 or 1, but they do exist. There are parts of this movie, even in the writing, rare as they may be, where I'm like, that's good. Like, that's a moment that's aiming to be funny, that's genuinely funny, or a moment that's aiming to be charming, that's genuinely charming. It's just over the course of these three movies, they've slowly gotten less and less, and I feel like that's kind of sad. And the problems, the the not just an absence of good, the presence of bad has gotten slowly greater with each movie, and it kind of sucks to look at it that way.
Uh, yeah, I guess we'll talk about this more when we get into Amazing Spider-Man. But given that this movie was not, it was more or less critically panned, um, and kind of divisive amongst fans. Do you think that they should have went forward with a fourth film?
Um, I don't know because, like you said, we're gonna get into it. I'm personally really looking forward to talking about Amazing Spider-Man because I really like that movie.
So do I.
I like maybe a couple of years ago, I would have been gung ho about the idea of Spider-Man 4 with these same people behind it and the same cast and everything. At this point, with 2 and 3 making me feel the way I do about these characters and their relationships, I'm kind of like, I don't know, it's probably for the best that we quit here. I don't really know. Without like radically changing, they could radically change things. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they do. If or like in the hypothetical world where this happened, they would do like a change from Spider-Man 3 to Spider-Man 4, similar to what we talked about from 1 to 2, where it's like they'll pick and choose bits of the story and the characterization that they decide they want to build on, and we like it more. But yeah, with the trilogy we have, I wouldn't really be all that invested in seeing a number 4 get made, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, honestly.
I'm sure I'd love it for the action and just Sam Raimi being a freaking genius director and like really, really great at visual storytelling, like better than anyone else in the genre, I think. But as far as like the characters in the story, yeah, I'm not sure what else you could do with these characters to make me care all that much.
And he was having a bit of trouble figuring out what to do with the fourth film. Like he had he had an idea of doing Vulture, um, and there was some talk, but I don't know if it was confirmed, of introducing Black Cat. But yeah, he was kind of taking a while to you know jump into pre-production and actually get working on the movie. And so Sony was like, "You're not making this movie fast enough," and
Uh,
and Sam Raimi was like, "I need more time." And Sony basically told him, "You don't have more time." And he said, "All right, then fine, I'm not going to do it." And obviously, Toby and Kirsten Dunst weren't going to come back without him as the director. So
yeah,
yeah, that's why they never got for it.
that's
Because
unfortunate.
yeah, if he'd waited, if they'd waited on him, then they would have lost the rights, and the rights would have went right back to Marvel.
Yeah. And like part of me is just really curious to think about like the world in which these kind of backdoor studio politics just aren't a factor in these movies. Like, studio politics are a factor in literally any movie that gets made and released by a major studio, but for superhero movies especially, they seem to be a consistent, like, driving force in a lot of decisions that get made. And on that note, we should probably wrap it up here, and we won't immediately jump into Amazing Amazing One, as we said, but it should be soon enough for those listening. We'll get into that tomorrow, the day after this recording, and I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I very much look forward to talking about that movie. So yeah, I'll talk to you about that tomorrow.
All right, guys. See you later.